Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel here, Doom Productions, home of the No Budget Film School. And today we got a special episode of Filmmaker Hangout. We have a buddy over at 922 Films, Dan Lotz. He's got a new movie out called The Long Con. And so we sat down and we interviewed him, talking about his movie, a little bit about his process, a little bit about his other movies, I think. And yeah, so if you haven't seen The Long Con, go for it. Go check it out. The link will be in the description. I think it's a really striking movie, and it's going to leave an impression on you. And I think it's another great example of what you can do with, well, some budget, a small budget. We're in the no budget film school, but the movie he made was made for, I think he said $2 to $3 grand, somewhere in there. So it's an excellent example of what you can do with no budget. So earlier this week, we sat down, we watched the movie. We just sat down, talked with Dan. I think the interview went really well.
It was fun.
He had some fun tidbits in there. But before you watch that, if you want to skip to the interview, click that symbol or that time code. I'm going to put a button so you can just click to the interview. But let's just talk Long Con a little bit before we get into that. So we watched that Monday.
Right, yeah,
Release day. Release day. He came over here. Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
It was good. No. So what, with no spoilers, let's say, why should people watch this movie? What was great about it? What struck us about it?
I mean, I think one of the most striking things was like the characters. They're just, every character had very distinct personalities, especially like some of the antagonists of the movie had a very like cool way of performing, and it was just a very like it drew you in. It really draws you in. And I think there's just a lot you can gain on each viewing. Like I felt one way about the movie after finishing it the first time, and then I rewatched it, and I kind of walked away with a completely different feeling about a lot of the characters, and that was really like fun to have a movie with rewatchability. I think that those kind of two things. Plus, it's like it's a very, like you said, striking, and I think that's a great word for it. Like you just kind of feel it just draws you in. I don't know. Like you can just sit and watch this movie and like just really enjoy the time you're spending with it.
I think it's solid performances all around, some great direction and acting, great cinematography. Yeah. I think, I mean, great music choice if you're looking for like, like Dan is always, he's got great soundtracks in all his movies. And if you're a sucker for those moments and like those needle drops in movies, I think this has got some great ones. But really interesting story with, I think, a lot of things to dissect and you can talk about afterwards. Lots of, and what I really like about it is the ambiguity with certain characters and certain things that happen where you don't necessarily know, how each person's going to read it differently. And that's going to feed how they read the overall movie. And I think that's I like it when movies do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of good restraint in like the editing, and like you could easily show a lot with this movie and give each character a very like, this character is this and this character is this, and give them a box. But he kind of he keeps those borders vague, and that was like, I think definitely like a great choice and great decision.
Yeah.
And getting to hear him talk more about it was really cool.
Yeah. So enough about us rambling. We're gonna cut to here is Dan Lotz, everybody.
Everyone listen up. Some of us are going to go out, find those who don't want to be found, and bring them back. Even if we don't succeed, we will be doing the will of what is right.
So I guess we'll just start. You have a new movie out, The Long Con. It's fantastic. We've seen it. What was the genesis? How did you get the idea for this movie?
The Long Con came about on a trip into Ohio. I was going to Ohio with my wife because my wife is from Ohio. And there was this like beach that I was on. There's this little beach in Ohio, and I was kind of in between projects at the time. I really hadn't an idea of what I was going to do. And suddenly I saw these group of people. It was like maybe like 10 people around a fire on the beach. And I was like, they seemed like an insular, like almost like a family or a community of people. And I don't know, it birthed this idea of wanting to do a movie about a cult. But then I was like, what if you had to penetrate that community? Like, what would be like the best way to do it? And what would be the reason you'd want to get in there and get out? And I thought about like a heist that takes place during a cult. And that was enough, I think, to make me write the original draft, which was called Carnal Pleasures at the time. And I wrote it in 6 days, basically in a drunken, fueled... I got like a bunch of like vodka, and it just literally for 6 days. It was just like a filthy animal, just drinking and writing, and then after 6 days, it was done. And basically, I took it to Joel, and Joel was like, "This is the worst thing I've ever read." Basically, but he's like, "There's like good nuggets in here. There's like some stuff here, there's some stuff there, and these parts are actually good. It's just the whole thing doesn't work." And so basically from there, me and Joel deleted the whole script, but we're going to keep like 10 pages. And those 10 pages became the nugget that became the long con. And I started from there writing more and more and developing the ideology of Carl, because that was the character that I really wanted to tell the story about. And that was the main character that I brought from the original draft. That was the one thing that was the main holdover. That and Andrew were a holdover, and after that, the script just kind of flew from us, and there was a lot of heated debates and arguments between me and Joel as to what the film would be about. And we finally, I think, at the early beginning of 2018, we kind of had an idea of what we wanted, and then we started production right after that.
Nice.
Yeah.
When was this? A few years ago? 3 years ago? 4?
So I started the script in 2017, but I came up with the idea in 2016. So 2016, the idea came to me. 2017, I wrote it in the 6-day period, because I wrote 7 scripts. I was trying to do 12 scripts in 12 months. I did 7 that year. And so I basically took Joel all these 7 ideas and was like, we're going to read all of them. He literally read the first one, which was Carnal Pleasures, and then we literally never read any of the other ones. Because he was just like, well, this is good enough. We could do this.
So now that you have your script put together, what was your process in like pre-production? So like finding actors, locations, and also after that, like storyboarding, shot listing, did you do that kind of stuff too, or yeah?
Yeah, so I think the pre-production process was so different comparatively to my other movies that I did after. But this one, we had made a short film called Pull the Trigger. I don't know if... it's funny because it's like the thing that really launched my career, but I feel like basically no one knows what it is. It's this short film I did that was basically another feature film idea that I'm still kind of working on. And it's like a proof of concept first 15 minutes of the film. If it was a 90-minute film, it's like the first 15 minutes. And so on that project, I met a ton of people that ended up being holdovers for the long con. I ended up meeting Anna Dvorak, who plays Meredith in the film. I ended up meeting Jonathan Wyatt, who plays Andrew. And that was the project where Joel basically, we had a different cinematographer, and basically at the end, Joel's like, we need me to be the cinematographer from now on. Because Joel wasn't really happy with how some of the cinematography turned out, and so that was when Joel was just kind of getting into going to college and finishing college and all that stuff. So we then I worked on another film called The Lurker, which was it's like a B horror comedy type movie, and it's like an actual production. It had like Scout Taylor Compton from the Rob Zombie. She's the lead actor in the Rob Zombie Halloween. So I actually met her, got to talk to her a bunch.
Nice.
So she's actually a very nice person. So I worked on a production with her, and that's where I met Charles, the cult leader, Carl. He was like the villain of that film. So spoilers for The Lurker, I guess. And then also Chloe Baldwin, who was the Etheria character. I met them, and so basically that's how I got my whole cast, was just through other productions I had worked on. So the casting was very simple. I just called them up and they all said yes. And I remember we got Charles sent us the audition for Carl. We had one of the monologues, and Joel was in a hotel that night for like some basketball thing for his siblings, and it was like 3 a.m, and I'm like, Joel, he sent us this thing. We got to watch it. And we watched it. And Joel was literally like, we were like giggling with excitement when we saw his acting. We're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And we basically were like, we have to have this guy. So it was pretty cool. And then once we got through that, the casting process, it was basically just, we had like a few production meetings, small stuff, and then we went right into production. And then the rest was history, sort of.
Wow. I got to ask you about the house. So how did you get this really neat house that you got to shoot in?
Well, I had to kill... No. The person who owns the house it's not my cousin, but she's like... I don't know how to describe it. I've always called her my cousin because she's like somehow related to my family, but she's not my cousin. And so we've always been pretty close friends. She is a photographer and I'm a videographer, so I did a lot of weddings with her. And so one time I went over to her house and I was like, your house is really nice. Like, this would be great for a movie. And she's like, well, if you ever make one, you could do it here. And I was like, okay. And I think she meant short film. So I basically wrote the script for a whole year with Joel. And the idea was, if she said no, we were going to throw the script in the trash and we were going to do a completely different project. I was like, this is the only house. There is no other house. Like, there is no house that has a greenhouse that is like antique. It's just not possible.
Yeah. No, that's such a cool spot.
And she said yes. And we were there for 30 days, 25 days filming at her house.
Oh, wow.
And she's kind of, I wouldn't say... She's the type of person that she doesn't have a ton of people over, so I think she liked the fact that we were there because she got to like interact with a ton of people, and it was cool. So she really enjoyed us being there, I think, for the most part, except when we were probably staying too late.
Yep. Nice.
But yeah, that's how I got the house.
And then,
So that cost nothing. That was free. She just basically said like,
yeah,
she basically said like, you can do it for free. And we actually did a premiere just for her, just to watch the film, because like I was like, you like deserve everything praiseworthy, because like the film would be nothing without the house.
further with kind of your pre-production process, when you're breaking down the visuals, I mean, the house is such a strong visual, it sounds like you wrote with that in mind. I mean, how do you plan out all your visuals throughout the movie? Because it's pretty visually striking. So do you
Are you talking about cinematography, like specifically how we got the shots, or are you talking about like the production design?
A little bit of both. I mean, when you're designing the movie and before you start shooting, are you storyboarding it really elaborately? Are you making a shot list? Do you know how you want the movie to look in notes, or are you just talking through it with Joel? I mean, what's your visual process like on that?
The funny thing is that cinematography is like the one thing that I think 922 Films gets consistent. Like everyone's like, the cinematography is like the one thing that we always get. And the funny thing is that me and Joel are like the least planning type people ever. So we don't have shot lists, we don't have storyboards. Our method has always been get to the set and we make it on set. So literally every shot is thought about and designed as we are rehearsing the scene in real time. So basically Joel's like, well, we're going to film it here and this is going to be pointed this way. I'm like, okay. And then we start blocking out the actors, working with the production design, trying to make sure it looks aesthetically pleasing. But there was not a lot of like forethought pre-production. Like we don't like sit around and be like, well, it should be like a close-up on his face and then a closer on his eyes. I find that very stale for me, because it's just, I don't know, we've always just liked that, like kind of like at any moment it could fail on set. There's something addictive about that.
Yeah.
And then sometimes that leads to problems. There was one scene where me and Joel were literally yelling at each other. We were like yelling in front of, there was one of our actors who we were closer friends with. And we have a guy his name's Ed, and he's like the AC. And he held the camera for all of it. And he's like the most chill dude, so he like keeps everyone calm. Well, he wasn't on set this day. And so me and Joel were literally yelling. It was the scene where I'm doing my cameo, so I was stressed as is. And I literally was like screaming at Joel, and Joel was screaming at me, and the other actor was like, guys, you gotta like, we need to get Ed back on set. We need to figure this out, because this is wrong. So there's points where that fails, but I think most of the time it ends up being a very, very successful way to create for us.
Got it.
Nice.
So how big was your crew in total, including cast and everyone that was on set?
So we only had 3 people behind camera. So me, Joel, Ed. And then you have the main cast, which I think is like 9 or 10 people deep.
Okay.
And that was basically the crew.
Got it.
So you go for 25 days. On day 1, what was it like the first day of shooting when you start this huge project with all these people?
It was weirdly underwhelming, I would say. It was just like the very first day was the scene. It's the kitchen scene where they're eating food. He's eating the pasta really loudly, and he's like slurping and all that stuff. And it was I don't know. It's one of the scenes I'm like least enjoy in the film for me personally. So I remember when we got done with it, I was just kind of felt like, oh man, like that just felt like filming a short film. It wasn't until we got to the house. We didn't get to the house until day 3. That was when I felt like we were on a movie.
Yeah.
Like before that, the first 2 days we were at my parents' house, which is the Lily's house. So there was a certain, like, it just felt like business as usual because we were doing a short film at my mom's house with just an insular amount of characters. And then once we sort of went to the cult house, I think that's when like things really started to get real.
Yeah. Did you shoot chronologically?
No.
Okay.
Nice.
It was completely and entirely. The very last thing we shot was the very opening scene.
Oh, interesting.
Wow, that's great.
So that was actually shot after the initial production block.
Okay.
So we basically shot everything, and then we shot that shot with Charles. He's at Joel's house, which no longer is in. Joel's family doesn't own that house anymore. So basically, nor the dog. The dog actually ended up passing away after we filmed. So there was that scene kind of holds special memories, I think, for Joel because he no longer lives there and no longer has that dog. So it's kind of like I don't know. It's a cool nostalgic trip for me to see that location.
Yeah, it's a great little time capsule.
Yeah.
Of like certain moments. Yeah. So when you're on set in the midst of your filming, how do you typically, walk me through how you run your set when you first get there. So say the call time is at 8 o'clock or 9 or I don't know when it was. So you show up to the set, your crew's there, your cast's there. Do you have a big meeting? Do you talk with each person individually? Or does everyone know what they're supposed to do right when they get there? How do you begin your day?
So usually for this film specifically, I got there first. I was always the first person there because I am ridiculously, I am a big on-time person. If you are not on time, you're pissing me off. Like, that's just how it is. So I am there an hour before everyone else is. Usually Michaela is gone by that point, so I'm sitting in the house. The house is haunted, by the way, just so you know.
That's even better.
Yes.
So it's creepy and it's just weird when you're in there by yourself, but I was always there by myself. And then all the crew would stumble in, usually actors first, Joel last, because Joel's always pissing me off because he's late. But I love Joel. And so Joel and Ed would come together. And then basically I start having Joel and Ed. Ed's basically like our guy who's doing everything. He's like setting the cameras. He's cleaning the lenses. He's doing all the work that needs to be done. Him and Joel are usually insular. They're talking to themselves. They're just trying to get the gear ready. And I like to intimately come up to each actor and be like, hey, Jonathan, how's it going? Talk to him and be like, so, excited? Did you prep the lines? Did you do this? Did you do that? To each person, and then kind of say, like, this is the idea. We're going to do this scene, this scene, this scene, and go to each person. I think doing a group feel just never gives you that personality that you want. So I feel like going to each individual person and talking to them just makes the most sense. Mm-hmm. And then by that point, Joel's usually ready. We're a slow crew, so we take a while to get going. So I'd say it takes probably an hour and a half to 2 hours to get the very first shot, and then after that it gets really faster after that, because every scene, once we get going, we're in the groove. But it takes a while for Joel to set up, for us to discuss the scene, to get going, and then once we're rolling for the rest of the day, and that's when we start really putting miles on the film.
Yeah.
And you mentioned rehearsals. When do you guys rehearse? Is that there on the day, or is that done prior to production?
They're on the day. So usually I would take the two actors, let's say if there's two actors in the scene, and I basically pull them away from Joel and be like, let's talk about the scene. And we basically walk the whole scene through like 10 times before we even hit the record button so that they're like perfectly good. Obviously, having like super talented actors like Jonathan, Charles, Anna, that helped a lot. It was a lot easier to be like, oh, and then they just nail it, and you'd be like, okay, let's just move on.
Nice. What was your filming schedule like? So, like, how long were your days? You said you shot for 25 days, right? So, yeah.
And it was, I think it was 30 in total, 25 at the cult house.
Yeah.
So in terms of the days, we usually would start at like 10 or 11 because Jonathan wouldn't get off the train until 11 because he was in the city. And then we would probably go to like 8 or 9, maybe 10.
Okay.
Every day was like that. There were some days that were longer, some days that were shorter if it was just like we only could get a certain amount of stuff. But basically 11 to like 8 or 9.
Nice. And were those like just days, did you have like weekends off or did you just power through?
We didn't shoot straight through. We did it over like 3 months.
Oh, okay.
So I think there were some days we did, some days we didn't. It was just basically whatever schedule. The scheduling was a nightmare on the project. I'll just say that.
We were late.
I can imagine. When we saw those group scenes, we were like, oh my gosh, a pain this must have been to schedule.
I'll say this. Being a producer on your very first project, it was like, it would be better to literally just get like your mom to be the producer or something. Like literally anyone. Like because like you focus so much on, like I literally was so stressed every time some actor would be like, well, I actually have like a cookout I'm going to, and you're like, are you serious right now?
We're getting flashbacks.
It was just PTSD from that, and luckily Chlorine and Sheep Theater being literally no one else but me, and then Chlorine with the limited cast really helped that. But long con, it was a structuring nightmare. Especially there was a few of the cast members who literally were not going to be were literally moving across.
Wow. Goodness.
Like one of them was like going to live in like California, and the other one was like literally going to this like summer retreat thing for like the whole summer. And it was like a nightmare to schedule that, to make it work. It ended up working out, but it was definitely difficult.
So when you're directing actors, kind of getting into the kind of micro level of your process, I mean, it sounds like you take them aside and you talk through the scene with them. What are some tips that you have for other filmmakers out there on how to work with actors?
I think the number one thing actors need to do well is don't be rigid with the script. Be willing to abandon things. That's the first thing. Like, how many times is a bad performance just bad writing disguised as a bad performance? I've also said, I had a friend who once saw a performance of a different actor we were doing, and he was like, oh man, that guy sucks. And I was like, literally, there is no bad actors. They don't exist. The only bad actors are people who are badly coached. And I think if you look at it from that mindset, you can get great performances from anyone. So I think things that are like general tips, make sure people don't blink. Like if you ask them and say like, hey, more blinking makes you look like a worse actor. I don't know how to describe it. It's just, it does. So like if anything, if you're going to be bad in the scene, at least keep your eyes open, because people will still be able to relate to you if your eyes are open. Another thing is just get them into a comfortable vibe. If the worst thing I think indie filmmakers do is they just accept an acceptable performance. They'll get to a point where they're like, oh, this guy did a decent line read, move on. It's like, no, if it's not good, just keep doing it until it gets better. You can work. I mean, we did one scene I think like 42 times or something like that. Like it was literally like I was like, we're gonna do it, and this, we're gonna do it until we get it right, because like I'm not gonna put subpar material in the film. And so I think being willing to get that great performance and knowing that sometimes the actors just need to loosen up before you get there, I think can really help you get there. And especially in the harder scenes, like the Etheria abuse scene, where she's getting slapped with a ruler. I mean, that scene we ran like at least like 5 or 7 times just to see what Charles would do. So
nice. So what was your budget for the movie?
Depends on who's in the room. To the most people, I say 2K. It's more like 3K. But 2K is like I don't know. There was the budget was pretty cheap. We did break a window on the movie. And so that was a $500 chunk of our budget that just was gone. So yeah, 3K was the budget.
So other than the window replacement, how did you like prioritize where that money got spent? Like, did you pay your actors? Did it go into production stuff? Like,
so I don't want to get too in detail about the payment of stuff, but there was one actor. Basically, everyone was working pro bono. There was one actor specifically that we did pay because that person was so crucial to the film, and we felt was having a more difficult role than everyone else to do in terms of like what they had to portray. So beyond that, it was all basically food. Like,
good answer.
You like I would say literally of the $3,000, I'd say probably like 2,000 of that was food.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing was, I didn't want. I think the biggest indie mistake I will ever see is when you're like, someone's like, yeah, my mom cooked a bunch of pasta. We have food for like the next week. And your crew's like groaning like, oh no. Like we catered, we did Panera, Chipotle, we did Jimmy John's. We did literally everything. We had vegan options. We did everything. We went all out on the food on this one because we were like, well, if we're going to have all these people here and they're going to be working for basically free, they at least have to have food they're going to like want to eat that's different each week. And so I think the number one mistake is that people try to like just make home cooked meals, which are good, but I feel like there's something special about like when you get something catered from like Chipotle. I don't know, because people get like jump up. They're sort of like, oh, like it's Chipotle. I love Chipotle, you know. Yeah. Rather than saying like, hey, my mom made this awesome pasta that that might be something they don't like. You know.
Yeah. I can't think of how many years we've just bought pizza and it'd just be like, especially when we were starting out, it was like pizza, and then like we go to like Winco or Fred Meyer and just buy like the cheapest big sub you could cut up, and that was it for the longest time.
Yeah, and I think that was the number one. We did, the funny thing was the very first day we did pizza, and so I think that was like we set off on a bad foot, and then basically we never did pizza ever again.
Yeah.
Pizza was literally the first and only time we did it was the very first. It was rehearsal day, and then we did pizza, and then that was it.
No, we did pizza. For the longest time, we didn't do pizza. Yeah. Because we were like, we did a little bit, but then we were like, no more pizza, too slow, too greasy, blah, 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 blah. Years later, we're like, you know what? We need something really quick to do. We're going to do pizza. And we got it, and we were like, this is pretty good. And then an hour into shooting, we were all just feeling it in our guts. We were like...
Yeah. I feel like pizza is like the absolute worst thing you can't... Like, it's quick, but it always just makes everyone sluggish, I think. The best stuff that we got was like going to like getting like really nice like sub sandwiches and stuff like that, where I feel like it's high quality, that works out, and I think people enjoy that much more than getting some like Domino's.
Yeah. So was the sandwiches, is that like the most popular item with your crew then? It sounded like?
Yeah, I mean we did have, so 2 of them were vegan. So the vegan stuff, I honestly don't remember. One of the vegans literally brought his own tub of like vegan food every day. So it was kind of awesome because we didn't even have to feed that person. They basically were like, well, I'm so particular, I'm just going to eat what I want. And then the other person, I think, just kind of got it, like wherever we went, there was always a vegan option that just worked out. But yeah, so I think the sub sandwiches for the majority of the crew was like the popular thing that we did.
How different was the script to the final film that you have?
I was actually just looking at the script last night because I was thinking, I wonder how different it was from the actual film. And basically, I'd say it's like 90% similar. And there was some changes. There was like one scene that was not in the script entirely that was added. And then the ending was changed. So basically, the ending is not even. It's the same reveal, but but it's shot at a different location. So basically, there's a certain location at the very end where our character goes there, and then like looks at this image. That was never in the script. They were supposed to just see that earlier before they went to that location. So it was just a little bit of a different switch around. I think that just felt right. But overall, the dialogue is mostly the same. There is some like little like word salad changes and stuff like that.
And are these changes, are they made by you? Or are they made by Joel, the cast and crew? I mean, who's making all these changes?
I would say cast and crew for the most part. I think sometimes there were things where I was like, let's just dilute this down. It doesn't need to be like 4 lines. It just needs to be 1 line. There was occasionally, like, again, the actors would just come up with an extra word or something that would just change the context that just worked. So, of anyone, it would probably be Andrew, the guy who played Andrew. He definitely was more of the improv style, and which is why we brought him on Chlorine, because we felt that he really worked with that style very well.
Nice.
So you talked about your first day, how you started off. What was your last day of shooting like?
The last day of shooting was so besides we had like a reshoot day, which was just kind of like little pickups. The last day, which was the opening scene, if I'm being honest, I have no memory of it. I was so tired. It was literally it was just one scene. So basically, the actor popped in for like an hour, and then we were done. And so it was like the most anticlimactic way to end the whole thing. It was like basically we had all these long days, and then it ended up being like this. We had to work with a dog in the film, so that was really. I mean, the dog was awesome because we knew that Joel's dog was really well trained. So we got to do, in my opinion, I think our use of the animal is like up there with actual like Hollywood films in terms of like what we were able to get the dog to do, how the dog reacted to things. I don't know, felt realistic to me and didn't feel like we were like trying to like use our, pet dog to do something cool. It actually looked like a Hollywood like sort of like animal trainer type thing. So that was awesome. And I think it added production value to be like, wow, they actually used a dog and got it to sit and then move and then bark and
animals will do that. They add a lot of production value.
Yeah, just like it's something that I don't think people think about, and in some of our other films we've had animals that I think just add like another layer of reality to what you're visiting.
Sure. Yeah. So, what was the hardest day of shooting Long Con?
It was the day. So I don't want to spoil your audience too much, but there was a day where a few characters cease to exist.
That's the best way to describe it.
And we had to shoot both of them. There was 2 situations with that ceasing to exist and we basically had to string them all together, and it was the hottest day. It was the hottest day.
Oh no!
We filmed it, and in the morning we had to do part of it, and then at night we had to do part of it, and then we were basically staying till like 3 a.m. in this person's house filming one of the scenes, and I was so frustrated. I remember me and Joel were just like, I was like, Joel, I don't honestly think we're gonna do it. Like I literally, my doubt on the project was at like the all-time high. I was like literally like Charles, I was like Charles and Jonathan are gonna like quit the production. They're gonna hate us. They're gonna say that we forced them to like work like slave labor. I was like I was freaking out. I was just like I was just bugging out. Just being honest. And Joel basically just like, calm down. We're gonna do it. We're gonna finish it. And we somehow, I don't know how, we just somehow got through it. But it was one of the most grueling. I put it in there as my number one, probably most grueling filming day of all time. Like it was just, I was exhausted. I don't remember the car ride home. I don't remember anything. I just literally just like was like, I want to forget this. It turned out amazing. But it was just like everything was really tense because I think people were getting, this was. Whenever you get to the end of a production, I think people get antsy to be like, okay, let's get done with this thing. Let's just finish it. So that was part of it.
Is there a best day where you're like, yeah?
So there was the beach scenes. I think those were fun. The beach scenes were really good, and we brought a tent. If you look in the background of one of the shots, you can see there's a tent. We brought a tent, and so basically we're chilling out there in the tent. One of our actors is like smoking a bowl. We were like chilling out. It was the most chill day of all time. We're eating sandwiches, and then I mean we did a lot of stuff because there's a lot of scenes in the film that are at the beach. But somehow it was a very relaxed day for me. I don't know if it was for everyone though.
Nice.
But for me, I was very relaxed.
Great. And so it sounds like the editing process was pretty extensive and took a while. Can you describe kind of what that was like, or just a general gist of how the editing went?
Yeah, so basically the year was 2018. I had just finished the filming with Joel. And unlike my newer projects where I edit as I go, this one was like, the whole idea was like, we're going to edit it as its own thing. We're going to do it as a whole block, which is the biggest nightmare fucking mistake I will ever make in my entire life. Like, I'm just telling you now, do not do that. If you were looking at the audience, do not do that. It is terrible. It is the worst thing you can do to yourself, because then you're forced to look at footage for like 3 months. And so I think it took me 4 or 5 months to edit the first, because I had never edited a feature before. This was my very first feature I was editing. So basically, I sat alone. I had Joel's computer, his laptop, because I didn't have my computer at the time wasn't powerful enough. So I had a laptop, and for basically 5 months, I borrowed Joel's laptop. I edited the film. And every day, I was just cutting a scene, putting it all together. And I think the final cut, the original final cut, was like 2 hours and 40 minutes. Oh, wow. Which was like, I mean, like that was like the first draft. And we like put it all together, and we didn't do any audio. So the very first pass, there was no audio. It was literally just syncing the clips up, putting the scenes together, and then I sent it to Joel, and I said, Joel, now you have to do all the audio. So then Joel spent like 2 months just syncing all the audio that we recorded on set. So he basically went through every clip, synced it all up, and then we had a meeting. Me, Joel, and Ed sat down, like, we have to watch this monstrosity. And we were all excited. We're like, yes, it's gonna be so good. And we watched it, and we're like, this is what is this? And I finally understood the quote by Scorsese that if you don't get physically ill, from your first cut, you're doing something wrong. It's like, yeah, that's definitely the feeling. I felt like I wanted to puke, literally, after watching it. I was like that bad. And after getting through that, we were like, okay, there's a lot of mistakes. There's some really good stuff here, but there's a lot of mistakes. So we trimmed the movie about an hour, like an hour and 10 minutes. We trimmed it down. And that's what ended up being the cut that everyone has seen now is that cut. But the audio was still a nightmare. It was basically like unusable, like 90% of it. So we decided to do ADR for the whole film. Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, and I don't know how successful we were, but I felt like we were pretty successful. I mean, so we basically recorded every actor, with the exception of a couple scenes that were like, usually the shouting scenes were things we did in ADR, because like, how can you recapture someone like screaming? Like it doesn't work. It just doesn't feel right. So overall, we recorded most of the movie. We recorded literally footsteps, water droplets, breathing, someone touches a jacket, everything. We went through all the Foley, and we did everything, room tone. And then once we got through that, we just did that recently, like 2 months ago. So it had been a while. The COVID kind of slowed us down a lot, because 2019 is when we did the ADR recording. 2020 was going to be the year we were going to finish the film, and then Cheap Theater happened, and COVID happened, and then we got to it in 2021.
Nice. I will say the sound design is one of my favorite things in the movie. I can't remember where I saw it, but I remember seeing you and Joel talk about dubbing the entire thing. Yeah. So I knew it was dubbed going into it, but I didn't notice it at all. Like, it was so well done, so well integrated. Sometimes I think we have the tendency to overdo it with adding too much, but I think you added just the perfect right amount. So
and there was a tendency to put too much, and I said to Joel, I said, think about like the 70s, think about the 80s. You listen to the ADR, it's just like some wind, some vocals, and an occasional like pat on the shirt or something specific. I'm like, we don't need to like have every little sound recorded. We don't. I'm like, I would rather it be minimalist than become this giant production where every little thing, it's like, oh, did he breathe there? We should record a breathing sound. I think that's the problem, and I think when ADR starts to sound weird, and I think also, I mean, we had actors. We literally spent like 7 to 10 days recording ADR, additional production days, where they literally came in for 8 hours a day recording ADR, which was a nightmare.
How did they enjoy it? Did they enjoy that process, or were they just kind of over it?
I think they were like excited to make the movie better, but I think they were like nervous because I think a lot of them were like, their performances were what they gave, but I think they were assuaged from that when they saw how easy it was to sync, and for the most part, it was pretty easy to get like the same style performance there. I think there's a couple lines that are worse because of the ADR, but I think 90% of it is so much better because of how the quality of it sounds. I think there's no reason to not do it, and I think had we shown the other version, it would have been like literally embarrassing, like how bad the audio was, because how big the ceiling was in that house. It was just a disaster.
Yeah. And what was your ADR setup like? Like, was it just like come over to your house and? Yeah.
It was in Joel's closet, so everyone went in the closet, and then just basically, we didn't even have any like foam or anything. We literally just used Joel's clothes as the denoising.
All been there. Yep.
And literally, I mean, I don't think most people can tell that the audio is like fully ADR. I think most people. I showed it to a bunch of people, and most people are like, "Yeah, I noticed that one line was definitely ADR there." And you're like, "Yeah, so what about the whole film?" Like, "Yeah, it sounds really great, but that one line, you're like, the whole film is ADR." Though. And then they're like, that's pretty good then."
Yeah.
It's a fun surprise. Yeah. This isn't on our question list, but I'm gonna just add this real quick.
Do it.
The music.
Oh, I was going to ask that question. You took it.
Okay, you ask it then.
The music. Where'd you get it? How'd you get it? Is it licensed? All that.
Yeah, so if you know anything about Chlorine and Cheap Theater, you know I flagrantly don't give a fuck about.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can swear on this show, but I'm going to.
We don't care.
I don't care about licensing on YouTube because YouTube basically doesn't care. As long as you don't make money off your film, which no one is these days anyways, you can literally put whatever you want in there, and they're just going to flag it for a claim and then block it. I think it's blocked in North Korea and Syria, but it's like, oh, okay, I guess no one's going to watch it anyways. But overall, I found the music. I had built a playlist when we were filming the movie, and a lot of the songs ended up into the film. I actually did the music, 2 weeks ago? I literally put all the tracks in. We basically deleted the whole original soundtrack because it was just terrible. And then we basically put in the musical pieces that we liked. Specifically, I think the Johnny Hartman song in the beginning that's used as a refrain like 3 times. I think that was like the brainwave when that hit. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to have a song that kind of carries us through the film. And so the music is just my personal taste. It's stuff I like to listen to on my off time.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I noticed it was just very similar in taste to the music used in Cheap Theater. Were there songs that like didn't make it into one but you used for the other? Or?
I kind of make like a general playlist for each film. So I could differentiate each one. So I feel like Chlorine was like folky sort of music. I call like Cheap Theater like almost like American just classics kind of. And this was more like jazzy doo-woppy kind of songs. So I think there was some bleed over probably from the projects, like, oh, that's the song I'll use for my next project. But I try to make individual playlists where like I curate the vibe of each film, and I think that's the only way the music comes out so consistently is just by curating. Like I already have the Chlorine 2 playlist already all set to go.
Oh man,
Nice.
so good.
Do you have a favorite track in The Long Con? Like, what's your favorite needle drop moment in the movie?
Again, by Doris Day. When she's going, he's gonna go sleep with her scene, and then that was the only needle drop that was in the script. I wrote Doris Day again starts playing, and I knew for a fact I wanted to use that song like a while ago, and so that song always, I don't know, they always felt like the film to me. I also like the Dream, when she's going, it's the flashback, and it's the song called Dream, and I think it's the way I processed it too. It sounds like it's in the distance, like it's like somewhere in the house. I like that flashback scene a ton. That's like one of my favorite scenes. Nice. So those are my favorite record drops, but they're all interesting.
Do you want to ask the theme one? I don't know how to ask that one.
Okay.
I want you to ask it.
Okay. Yeah. So, what would you say? So, okay, context from where we're coming from. We saw the movie. We were hooked. We loved it. But something that we love to do is really see what the filmmakers, like their idea of the theme. So we have an idea of what the movie is about, but we could be totally off. So what to you is the main theme of this movie, or what is this all about?
So I'm going to be vague because I like being a little secretive about this.
Yeah, of course.
So I'll say what are important scenes to the theme more than what the theme is itself. For me, I think the opening scene is critical to how you examine the film, and I think everything that Carl says is like you need to listen to what he's saying. Like there's a lot of like what I would consider gibberish in there, but there's a lot of what I was trying to say. And I think that I've discussed this on some live streams. Is basically also there are definitely constant themes of abuse of power, abuse of certain structures that abuse people. Specifically, I think the Hollywood system and the whole Me Too movement was something that was definitely on my mind when creating this story, and it was sort of something that. When I think I was more aware of it when we were in production, because that's when it was really happening, and I really started to build those kind of bridges of like, this is kind of what the film is about the abuse of power in some ways. So that's definitely a big part of the film, but there's some other stuff, other little breadcrumbs that I drop all over the place that I think have different potential meaning to the greater context of the film.
Wonderful.
Yeah. This is kind of backtracking, but what's your favorite scene in the film?
Give me a second. Let me think. There's a moment where someone ceases to exist. Okay, how about this? I'll say it, and then you can censor out the name of the character. Mm-hmm. So, gets... You censor both those words. In the car, and there's like a long lens shot from Meredith's perspective, and she's watching him, and I don't know. I think I love that scene because you feel so helpless in that little moment, because you're like, oh my gosh, no, they wouldn't dare. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know. I've wanted to see what people's reactions to that for like 4 years, and no one has said anything about the scene, so I'm like, tell me. Because I was really wondering what people would react to the fact that a main character would die.
Mm-hmm. I think it really ramps up the movie from there for us. I don't know about you, but I got a real strong like 80s slasher film vibe in the sequence following that, and I think the is like, bam, we're in a horror movie now, and he goes and it's
very Carpenter inspired. That's where my Carpenter takes over. John Carpenter style. I mean, literally, my mom was watching it, and she literally was like, "Kill him! She's talking about one character supposed to kill another character. She was going crazy because I think the slasher vibe is definitely present.
So, of all the features that you've made so far, so you got Chlorine, Sheep Theater, and now The Long Con, which one is like your favorite, and which one do you think is your best? Which child is your favorite?
My favorite, which child is my favorite? You put me on the spot here. It's impossible for me to rate them because they're also different experiences. If I had, so like, if in terms of personally for me, like my personality, like what I would like, I think Sheep Theater is just most myself, most me, so I like that the most. But like, if we're talking best, they're all best for different things. I mean, like, okay, if you look at Chlorine was just my most successful. Like, everyone just saw that movie. So, like, that's like, if we're talking about, like, what achieved what I wanted the most, which is to get people to watch it and excited about it, Chlorine is, in a way, my best. But if you talk about my most personal film, then it's probably Sheep Theater. But if you talk about my most mainstream film that probably has the most mainstream appeal and probably will have the biggest life, I think Long Con definitely has much more deeper themes. And I think it's like a Get Out type movie where it's like a movie about something. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Chlorine and Sheep Theater are not really about something. They're more like slices of life or a personal sort of movie for myself. Whereas I feel like Long Con is something you could put in a theater and like people would be like, oh yeah, I kind of like that movie. It was about this, and this. So I think they all have their benefits.
What's advice you'd give to anyone else who wants to go out and make a feature? And what's next for you, essentially, in terms of your filmmaking career?
So my advice to filmmakers would be, don't limit yourself to just doing what feels like what you're told to do. Like, everyone tells you to do the short film, then like do like 10 more of those, and then you'll finally be ready for a feature. I feel like with Chlorine, with Long Con, with all that, I just went out and did what I wanted to do, which is make movies. And so I think so many people hold themselves back from doing the feature as they're scared. They're like, oh no, I can't do it because X and X told me that it's not possible. I can't do it. It's like, you can do it. It's just you have to make sure the only way you're going to be ready is by doing it now. If you wait 5 years, you're going to probably just end up waiting another 5 and another 5 until there's some great opportunity, and that great opportunity is never really going to come. And so for me, that and there was another half of the question. What was the other half of that? It was my future, or like what am I going with things?
What's next for you this year or in the next few years?
I feel like I'm like Tom Brady after he got done with his whole stint with the Patriots. I feel like I'm made a free agent. I have all the room to run. I mean, I want to do the 12 features, which is basically a feature a month, every month, until the end of time, basically. And I'm hoping that will be something that will take off and will be a cool concept. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. Maybe that will work, maybe it won't. And then maybe after that, I'm hoping maybe the last feature, what I'm thinking about doing is making the last feature like this really big one that's going to take more than just 1 month. So it'd be like 11 features in 12 months, and then the final one would take like 6 or 7 months, and it would be like a full scale, like probably gonna get like an Alexa, do like the whole like rental of Alexa, do the whole thing, and like actually do like the production big scale. Oh, nice. And hopefully try to make the jump to bigger movies potentially.
I'm like salivating at the thought of that. That's getting us excited.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is the title of it. It's called The End of the Decade. Is the title of the film. It's basically an Inherent Vice style movie about basically conspiracies and filmmaking.
Oh my God!
You heard it here, first, folks. Have you said this?
So
it's
a story about a guy. I'll go a little bit into it more. Why not? Basically, he collects DVDs, and he finds this DVD of this movie, and he falls in love with this girl in the film. That this is like this B production, and suddenly she moves into the town that he lives in, and she lives at his apartment now, and then he starts to become friends with her, and then she disappears, and someone breaks into his apartment and basically destroys the DVD that he had of it, and it leads him down to conspiracies where potentially nefarious people are trying to delete indie films for some specific reason, and that's as far as I'll go.
Have you seen the movie Under the Silver Lake?
It's very Under the Silver Lake, and it's Under the Silver Lake, Inherent Vice kind of movie, and that's exactly.
That sounds amazing.
So I'm really excited. I have a ton of ideas for it, and the ending shot, I can just picture the ending shot is so crazy, like in my head. So that's like my dream project. So that hopefully
How much are plane tickets to Chicago? How much?
We're road tripping.
We're road tripping for this one.
Hey, we'll be probably shooting it next summer. That's the hope, and that's like going to be like the big feature I have. Like, it's probably going to feature like tons of people, like probably like 25, 30, maybe 40 actors.
Well, if you got room for Dune Productions to help out, you let us know.
Yeah, we always got an extra room in my apartment, so I always have actors or people come by. So I'm always you guys are definitely invited over, and I might do there might be a chance. I actually don't want to announce this. Never mind. Actually, I was gonna say something. But someone else told me not to say this. Oh. So because it's the other person that I'm involved with. But there might be another collaboration with a big. There might be another collaboration with a big director on a movie potentially, like a big in the folk filmmaking community.
Looking forward to
type
that.
Thing.
Nice.
I'll talk to you guys about that after this.
Yes. Well, I think we've gone through our questions. You've been super generous with your time and your answers. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find you online? Plug yourself.
922 Films at YouTube or $5 Film School, I guess, if you like the other part of our surname. Yeah, you can find me there. I have 3 feature films: Sheep Theater, Chlorine, Long Con, out now. Check them out. They're free movies. I mean, if you hate them, you can just not watch them.
This is the best plug ever.
Best plug ever. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, really, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.